Good evening, חברות and חברים. Thank you for joining us for our webinar about the situation in Israel and what WIZO is doing on the ground. We are on day 40 since the horrific massacre on 7th of October 2023, and since 240 hostages were taken, over 1,400 murdered, and many injured. Our hearts are heavy as the war unfolds in Israel. However, WIZO is on the ground, working constantly in providing food packages, shelters, and accommodation, psychological and critical need for families, the IDF women, children, and the elderly, who need our help the most. Here in WIZO Victoria, we are working hard in fundraising for Israel, particularly with a new campaign called I'm Not Okay. This campaign brings awareness and much needed support to Israelis, individual and family traumatized by the event of October 7th. This must be addressed immediately as Israel is looking at a looming mental health crisis. Once again, WIZO at the forefront. WIZO Victoria has released a statement on Israel's situation. We wrote a letter to the police minister about the pro-Palestinian rally at Princess Park on Erev Shabbat. And we wrote a letter to the Minister of Education condemning the pro-Palestinian Melbourne school student rally coming up. We had a great Dance for Israel event with over 100 participants dancing Israeli dance and holding Israeli flags. And we are involved with a lot of other organization initiatives in our Melbourne community. Tonight, we will be discussing what has unrevealed in Israel and the work that WIZO does in Israel to help better the situation. Our two guest speakers who are currently in Israel, Anita Friedman, World WIZO Chairperson, and Rolene Marks, Chairperson, World WIZO HASBARA. Anita immigrated by herself to Israel when she was only 17 years old. Anita has been a member of the WIZO movement for over 25 years, during which she has filled many positions in Israel and abroad. Anita is a strong advocate for the right of mothers to build a career and empower individuals. She will share with us what WIZO is doing on the ground. Please write questions in the chat as Anita will answer them at the end of her presentation. Before Anita will join us, I will share with you a short video of the I'm Not Okay campaign.
היי, אני נועה פילד, אני בת 33 מגבעתיים. אנחנו נמצאים במעון אביב של ויצו. הבן שלי כבר, צורי בן שם. ב7 באוקטובר היינו במושב ניצן ועושים חזה, אצל המשפחה של הניסות שלי. שרה, התעוררנו ב6:30 בבוקר, מזל שהיינו עם תום המעמד. היה הפגזות הרבה יותר מהרגיל, ולזוג שלי אפשר לזירה שזה משהו כבר לא בסדר, בסוף שעה בערך התחלנו לקבל ידיעות שאנשים ככה מכירים מזהים עם השבילים של ילדים. בסופו של דבר נשארנו שם עד יום שני של הצבא חילץ אותנו. היינו צריכים להתחבר במעמד, בשקט ובחושך. התקלחנו בחושך, אכלנו את זה בשקט. פשוט קיווינו שלא יגיעו אלינו, שמזלנו הגדול ככה. זה היה ממש כיף לראות את המאמצים שעושים פה, כדי למצוא מענה בטוח לבן שלי וכדי שאנחנו נוכל להתפנות. והבנו שזה ממש ספק לשגרה שלו. בעצם זה הצלחנו בסופו של דבר לחזור לשגרה מלאה ומאוד נמוכה גדולה.
מה שלומך?
אני בסדר כל זמן שאני בסדר, בשאר הזמן אני לא בסדר.
Thank you, Ronit. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, dear friends, WIZO Victoria. Good evening for you. Good morning for Rolene and I. I'd like to open with a few words about WIZO. We were founded 103 years ago in England, and we're Israel's largest educational and social welfare organization. We work hand in hand with the Israeli government, and we provide diverse services through our 800 institutions and programs touching the lives of tens of thousands of Israelis from birth till golden age in dozens of communities throughout the country. Our diverse network includes 167 daycare centers caring for over 11,000 infants and toddlers from 3 months through 3 years old. We operate 5 youth villages and 3 special high schools, educating some 6,000 youth from the age of 12 to 18. We have 2 shelters for women victims of domestic violence, 18 foster homes and emergency frameworks, numerous programs for girls, women, and families, and much, much more. Thousands of WIZO volunteers work with vulnerable populations in over 40 communities around the country. And our second-hand clothing chain, with 50 stores, serves underprivileged Israelis and contributes to environmental sustainability. WIZO is also an international movement of Zionist women with over 100,000 members in over 38 countries. WIZO is like the film that won the Oscar for Best Picture this year. Everything, everywhere, all the time. It is this scope and diversity that enables us to have such a huge impact in Israeli society and enables us to touch the lives of so many people in so many different ways. And this has never been truer than during the current war, and it is on this that I would like to focus my remarks. Tonight, I stand before you not only as the leader of this global movement, but as a witness to the incredible spirit of the people of Israel in the face of unimaginable adversity. On October 7th, during Simchat Torah, a day that should have marked the beginning of a new chapter and symbolized the end of the Tishrei holidays, our world was turned upside down. In Israel, Simchat Torah traditionally marks the conclusion of the Tishrei holidays and signifies a fresh start. On this day, we read the final Torah portion of Vezot Bracha, and immediately we follow it with the first portion, Bereshit. It's a time for us to return to our daily routines, renewed and re-energized after a period of rest and reflection. However, as you all know, this year on October 7th, during Simchat Torah, Hamas militants stormed into nearby Israeli towns from Gaza, resulting in the tragic loss of over 1,200 Israeli and foreign citizens, and the kidnapping of at least 240 Israelis and foreigners in a surprising and unprecedented attack. Hundreds are still missing. The weight of this great tragedy hangs heavily over our hearts, and our vision of the future is clouded by the profound trauma that has befallen our beloved nation. I would like to emphasize that we are acutely aware of the deep distress that you and all those who love Israel around the world have been feeling since that terrible day of October 7th. In some ways, it's even harder for you than it is for us. Because every morning you go out into a world that does not share the terrible shock and grief that you feel. The words Ace and Scoop and Babi Yar do not pop into their heads. Their world did not turn upside down on October 7th. Experiencing these traumatic events time here in Israel is in some ways easier than being far away. Here, everyone around us is sharing the same experience. After all, mourning is meant to be done in a group. That's the role of the Shiva in the Jewish tradition, to mourn together. As individuals and families, we may have been overwhelmed by the grief and outrage. But as WIZO, whose fundamental responsibility is to the people of Israel, we could not allow ourselves to be paralyzed by this tragedy, and we sprung right into action. Our first task was to reach out to our entire WIZO community in Israel, our 6,000 employees and thousands of volunteers, to make sure everyone was accounted for and offer initial help and comfort to those affected by the massacre and its nightmarish aftermath. Every one of us is going through difficult times, and nearly every home and family has been touched by this tragedy. Some have lost loved ones to murder or kidnapping. Many others have husbands, brothers, children, grandchildren who have been drafted for the emergency service in the IDF, most of them on the dangerous front lines of the war. 90 of our WIZO employees have been evacuated from their homes, and 70 of our WIZO employees have been called up for emergency military service. We are in touch with all these families, providing assistance and a loving embrace to every single one of them. Within days of the start of the war, we began putting multiple initiatives in motion, such as convincing the government to allow us to open 11 emergency daycare centers, serving children of critical medical personnel in 7 major hospitals around the country, so their parents could be free to perform the life-saving work on the more than 4,000 Israeli wounded on October 7th. For about 10 days, these 11 WIZO daycare centers were the only daycare centers open in Israel. I personally visited the Shamir the daycare center in the Shamir hospital, and had the privilege to meet some of the parents who work in the hospital. One of them, a woman, a scientist, who works in the pathology department, told me something that I cannot get out of my head. As a pathologist, she normally works with tissue samples to help doctors with the diagnosis. But in the first few weeks of the war, she spent all her time identifying the bodies of Israelis murdered by Hamas. What an awful reality. Another emotional meeting I had that week was with an Ethiopian woman named Ziva Taka, whose 21-year-old son, Binyamin, was killed on the first day of the war while serving as a soldier of the Golani Infantry Brigade. Ziva's personal story encompasses all the different phases of WIZO, and I'll explain to you how. Her son Binyamin was a graduate of our WIZO Nachlat Yehuda Youth Village. 15 years ago, Ziva and her children spent a year in a WIZO shelter for women's victims of domestic violence in Jerusalem. And then, after she left the shelter, she worked for many years as a teacher in our daycare center in Beit HaKerem in Jerusalem, a few meters from the shelter. We spent a long time talking to and comforting Ziva, crying together. Binyamin has an older sister who is also a graduate of WIZO Nachlat Yehuda, and a younger brother who idolized Binyamin, who was like a father to him, and the young boy was really totally broken. In the Ethiopian culture in Israel, as in many immigrant cultures, the oldest children in the family, the ones that have grown up in Israel, serve as a bridge between their immigrant parents and the society around them. So this was a huge, huge loss for the family in so many ways. Now, getting back to what WIZO is doing on the ground. Our volunteers are active all over the country, caring for the people in their community and working to bring food, clothing, and other assistance to people of the South and the North and to our soldiers. We have launched a campaign called With WIZO, You're Never Alone, which offers a wide range of support services provided by WIZO volunteers to women whose spouses have been called to the military service. These volunteers will babysit, do your food shopping, help you cook, and of course, lend a sympathetic ear and a loving embrace. The base for our volunteer work in Israel has always been WIZO Israel branches and secondhand shops, begutiot. Most were closed during the beginning of the war, but more and more of these have gradually reopened. And we're up now to almost 36 of the centers and 38 of the begutiot. But even in places forced closed by the war, our devoted volunteers found ways to organize and to work to benefit those who need help the most. We also have increased the hours and the staffing of our 3 national telephone lines, which have been flooded with calls. One for the advice to parents of small children, one for women victims of domestic violence, and one for men in the cycle of domestic violence. 3 of our youth villages, including Adasim, Nahalala, Nachlat Yehuda, home to 250 participants in the Naale program, were open throughout the war, and now all of the other ones are open. The Naale program, 250 of these kids, these are Jewish teenagers from around the world who came to Israel to live and study. Many of these children came to us last year as refugees from war-torn Ukraine. Imagine the trauma they are experiencing now, going through another terrible war. But we're doing everything we can to ease their fears and homesickness. I visited one of these youth villages, WIZO Nachlat Yehuda in Rishon LeZion, and discovered that Nachlat's dining room had become and had been turned into a regional center for packing and distributing care packages to soldiers, residents of the South and North, and local residents of Rishon LeZion who are in distress. We met with some of these Naale students, and it was amazing to see how happy they were despite the war. You know, we came to lift their spirits, and instead they lifted ours. They are so grateful to WIZO. They praise the wonderful food, the level of studies, everything. When we asked if they need anything, at the beginning, they were reluctant to say anything, but then a little girl said, you know, I would love a ping pong table, kids being kids. And the other one said, we need more laptop computers, especially now that some of the studies are remote. From here, we visited another youth village, WIZO Gan Vanof in Petach Tikva, which was hosting over 150 displaced Israelis from both the north and the south. These are people who have lost their homes or were forced to leave them. We met with a number of women, mothers, grandmothers, and their children. Most of their husbands have been called to the army. And I was deeply touched, but not surprised at all, to see the incredible hospitality we are extending to these families. They are being smothered in kindness and generosity, being fed delicious and plentiful food, you know, in Israel, how not? With all kinds of recreational and educational activities being provided to them, and most importantly, to their children. The village staff has gone out of their way to help them, including much needed emotional and psychological support. It was so beautiful to see these children roaming around the open and green spaces, playing with animals in the petting zoo, and simply being at peace in a place that is so calm and loving and therapeutic. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have been displaced from their homes. And Israelis' hotels all over the country are filled with people from places like Sderot, Ashkelon, Nahariya, Kiryat Shmone. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that the people at WIZO Ganvanov are having an experience unlike any other, including those staying at the fanciest hotels, because really, there's nothing like the total loving embrace of WIZO. We are also hosting a number of displaced families in Hadassim. They had to evacuate their homes in Sderot, and they reunited with staff members that cared for them long, long ago. So it was beautiful to see them. Our parents' home, a facility for the elderly with 110 residents between ages 75 and 105 years old, including 35 Holocaust survivors, is and was all the time operating. We are taking good care of these wonderful people who have contributed so much to our country. Here too, we took displaced Israelis and we're housing them in the parents' home. To give you an idea of the kind of people we are hosting, one family from Beersheba is a single mother struggling with cancer, her two parents, both over 90, and a granddaughter. You know, the parents' home is very close to the Ichilov hospital, so this mom can get the services she needs right now. And we have been able to host these families with the generous support of you, all our donors from our federations. We continue to support 140 women and 250 children in 9 different communities. I think we're now up to 10 different communities who are part of our safety net program, who has been generously supported by all our federations. This is a diverse support program for women after they leave the domestic violence shelter to help ensure that they are not compelled to return to their violent spouses. These women face constant challenges, even in normal times, but the situation is so much worse during wartime. Here too, we're benefiting from your support. Thank you again. These are just a few of the many initiatives WIZO is taking during this time. Every day brings new initiatives, new ways of helping people. And I'm pleased to inform you that a number of our key services are gradually returning to operation. As I said, as of today, we have reopened over 158 of our daycare centers, of the total of 167. There are now 8,400 babies and toddlers being cared for again by our devoted teams. Most of the centers are not operating at full capacity because we have had to limit the number of children in each center. Why? Because if there is a red alert for incoming rockets, a frequent occurrence in most of the country, there is no way that a few teachers can move 70 babies and toddlers from their classroom to the bomb shelter in 90 seconds. We tried, believe me, it takes much longer than that. Our high schools are also reopening, and we hope that the developments in the war will not force Israel to again close these educational institutions, which would be terrible for the kids, their parents, and the economy. And this morning I found out that most of our kids are volunteering, helping with the agricultural efforts in the South, which is so important for our country now. Most of our services that care for the most at-risk populations are operating, and we're operating most of the time. Our women's shelters, foster and family units such as Neve WIZO, our mishpachtonim, and emergency centers in our youth villages. Our 2 major centers in Beersheba that care for extreme high-risk teenage girls and young women, Adi and Makom Balev, supported by WIZO Australia, which were closed from the beginning of the war. We have reopened, but even while they were closed, our professional teams and volunteers were keeping in daily touch and in close proximity with all these young women to provide them with food and other physical needs, and providing them counseling and support to help them get through this difficult period. There is so much more that I could tell you about, so many personal stories of tragedy, of heroism, of simply enormous love and giving. This is WIZO. WIZO is also active in the international efforts concerning the 240 hostages, many of them women, small children, and the elderly. I'm sure Rolene will talk about it a little bit longer. We have marshaled our powers of soft diplomacy and launched a global campaign demanding their immediate release. We call on all of you, our members around the world, to join us by appealing to local and federal governments in your countries. I cannot conclude without mentioning the absolute incredible show of solidarity we have gotten from all our 38 federations around the world. The international emergency campaign we launched has been an overwhelming success, bringing millions of shekels so urgently needed to keep our organization running when there is so much uncertainty and financing urgent needs of the moment. You, all of you, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have been a great supporter and partner during these critical times. Your devotion and successful efforts to bring urgent needed resources to Israel are moving and very, very much appreciated. The donations you all have made are imperative in order to be able to continue giving our services to the neediest Israelis. But your support goes beyond the philanthropy. Although you're all far away, we really do feel you here with us. We feel your love and your concern very, very strongly. We are one family, WIZO, the Jewish people, Israel. We will survive this. We will overcome, and we will flourish as long as we all stay together. ביחד ננצח. And of course, Am Israel Chai. Thank you for listening to me and for giving me this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Anita. תודה רבה. Anita is ready now to take questions. So Anita, I will ask you a few questions. We got a question from Ramona. What are some of the ways WIZO is helping to address such trauma?
Okay, so we actually have a lot of experience in that area. We were the first organization to put into our daycare centers and youth villages a resilience program many, many years ago. You know, this country has been through a lot of many wars. And the people that we give services, especially the kids in our youth village, in our emergency centers, need that resilience type of project and program. So now, with your monies, with the campaign that we're doing, we will be able to bring this in a massive way to all the populations that we take care of, being the daycare centers, the parents, the teachers, the kids, being in our youth villages, the students, the parents of the students, the teams that work there, being in our shelters, in every one of our projects. We're on the ground, we touch the lives of people. That is our experience and our how do you say, advantage over everybody else. And that's why as soon as the war started, we sprung into action. The government was paralyzed for a few days, and civil organizations like WIZO were the ones that had presence in the ground, and we could right away react. I'll give you an example. I arrived to Israel that day, on that Saturday, from a private vacation at 10:30 in the morning. We arrived right into at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had a phone call from one of our members in Mexico. She had one of her members telling her that her son was a lone soldier, and they knew that he had been injured, but they didn't know how he was. They knew he was in Soroka Hospital. I called right away the chairperson of WIZO Israel. She sent one of her volunteers from the Beersheba branch to Soroka. In 3 hours, we had a picture of the boy with the member to the mother, And so that's what we do. We're on the ground and we take care of the people.
It's so true. We are everywhere and we touch every lives in Israel.
Right.
I agree. I have another question, Anita. We can go over. I have from Hadassah. What is the most urgent need that WIZO need at this time?
So as Oni told you, we came out with a campaign because the whole country is in trauma, including us. I was just now at a mission in Canada. I didn't know I was in trauma, to tell you the truth. I had been a month here and I had been fine because when you're here, you're strong and you have to be strong for your family, for the organization. And there, sharing the stories I broke down. So really, this is the biggest need that the country has right now. And WIZO is ready, willing and ready to start giving this to everybody that needs it, everybody. We touch the lives of tens of thousands of people here. So we are ready to do that. So the biggest need is to take care of that.
Thank you, Anita. It is true. And I've been there as well. And I think we are, the trauma is the most. Yeah. Another question from Paulette. Can you envisage a time when Sderot will be rebuilt and re-inhabited? It's our daycare center still viable?
All our institutions are viable. First of all, hi, Paulette. Nice to hear from you. All our institutions are viable and are fine. We were the first organization that built daycare centers, that the whole daycare centers is a shelter. We don't have only a bomb shelter there. The whole center in Sderot is built as a bomb shelter. So we're viable, we're fine. The question about when this will happen, it's a very difficult question to answer right now. First, we have to concentrate and focus on making sure that Hamas is not there anymore. The country has to go through a process of rebuilding the trust of the citizens in order for them to go back and rebuild. They are ready to do that, but as long as they don't trust and they don't have that security, they won't go back. This can take years.
Thank you. Another, it's anonymous. We want to fundraise for WIZO, and I want to know what makes WIZO different from all other organizations that asking for donation.
It depends what kind of organizations you have. I just gave you the whole spread of what we do and how we touch the lives of people, and we are in direct contact with the people. We take care of the people. So in that sense, we're different from other organizations. We're not a first responder organization. We're not Zaka. We're not the Magen David Adom. We're not the IDF. We're a social organization that takes care of the people, of the society.
And another question from Hila. Asking if WIZO considering stepping into the social media ring on advocating as anti-Semitism around the world is on the rise, and as this seems to be one front of this war that is desperate need for help.
We are very much so. Rolene will talk about that for sure. And as I said, we're using our soft diplomacy all over the world to make sure that we give tools. That's Rolene realm. She will talk about it. I will let Rolene answer that question.
I think we're going into the last question.
Okay.
And how is WIZO funding all this war initiative over the regular project?
Well, at the beginning, everything was closed for 2 weeks. And we are in discussions with the government to make sure that they reimburse us for the projects that we haven't been able to get money for. We are taking care in the organization of every penny. We've done a lot of downsizing because we have to survive these times. So we're doing the responsible thing here and making sure that we're looking at everything that doesn't need to be done right now, and we're not doing it. Okay.
Anita, I
Thank
would
you,
love
Rolene.
to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I want to say, that it's always pleasure to hear you. And I'm sure that all of us learned a bit more in depth of what WIZO is doing and how important it's our work. So, toda raba. Yeah.
Thank you, Rolene.
Thank you. Now I will ask and invite us, Rolene. So I would love to welcome Rolene Marks. Rolene is the chairperson of World WIZO HASBARA. She is a member of the media team Israel, a journalist and a media and marketing expert, passionate with a political commentary on Israel and the Middle East. She had a numerous global advocacy publications. Currently living in Modi'in, Israel, Rolene volunteers for WIZO and previously represented the organization at the World Zionist Congress. Rolene will take question at the end as well. So here is Rolene.
Good evening, everybody. It's such a pleasure to wake up with you every morning when I bring you your news. I just want to refer to, I think it was Hila's question about advocacy online. You get in the WhatsApp group, you get all the updates, you get videos, you get articles, you get everything. But the onus is on you guys in your federations to do your social media. If you want specific webinars or seminars with me, I'm happy to do that anytime, but you are getting all the tools. I'm actually busy putting together a special edition Straight Facts, and I ask that when you do get it, chair people and presidents, when you do receive it from Revital, who sends it out every month, please share with your federations, because you are getting the tools, but you guys need to use those tools. So let's talk about the current situation. And as Anita was speaking, I was thinking to myself just how personal this is for us as a WIZO family. All of us are impacted by this war. We all know somebody either missing or held hostage, who has fallen in battle or who was murdered on that day. But I always go back to 2015, our EGM, when Kibbutz Netiv HaSara opened their arms and gave us such a beautiful lunch, because in times of crisis, WIZO is always there. For the lady who's asking what makes us different to any other organization, we are the country's emotional first responders. When the battles have been fought and won, because we will be successful, when the horrific job of clearing and burying our murdered brothers and sisters, when the wave of trauma comes, and it's going to come like a tsunami, unlike anything we've seen, and as Anita said, we're all feeling it. I might cry during this update, and I'm sure you will all understand. WIZO is this country's most trusted, biggest social welfare organization. We are the people there to be the backbone of this country and to be that emotional support system for all of our citizens. Our tagline is doing what matters, and we really, really show up and do what matters on the ground every single day in so many different ways. So let's go back to that horrific morning of the 7th of October, which started like any other Shabbat morning for all of us, until we heard our red alerts going absolutely crazy. Now, on the day I said to my husband, I said, either something big is happening or my app is malfunctioning, because it's crazy, it's not stopping. And where we live in Modi'in, we're quite high, so we get everybody's booms from Herzliya to Jerusalem to everybody, and our own, we can hear everything. So on a day like that, and a day like when we have massive barrages to the south and center, I'm sitting here in my shelter, it just shakes and booms, which is a trauma all on its own. As the day unfolded, we realized that we were under rocket attack, but something more insidious is happening. We started to hear about infiltrations in our southern communities. We started to hear about Hamas terrorists in small communities like Kibbutz Be'eri and Kfar Aza, Nir Oz, in towns like Sderot, on army bases and police stations. And as the day unfolded and we started to see the horrific footage, I think we all remember that moment when we saw Shani Look, and as we heard now this morning, those terrorists that kicked and spat and paraded her lifeless body on the back of a pickup truck have been eliminated by the Israel Defense Forces. As those images started to get in, we started to understand that this was an attack on Israel, on the Jewish people, on our citizens, that we hadn't seen in our entire 75-year history. Not since the Shoah, since the Holocaust, have we seen a day with a single loss of Jewish life as we saw on that day. And as the days unfolded, we learned about the depravity, the barbarism inflicted by Hamas, an internationally recognized terror organization, on our men, our women, our children, our babies. And I'm not going to go into graphic detail because we know the stories, and it's extremely traumatic to talk about them, but we have to bear witness. We have to hear what happened, because we have to be the generation that makes sure that we record history and that never again becomes never again. And 240 of our innocent civilians, including foreign nationals, have been taken hostage in Gaza, held in conditions we cannot even begin to comprehend. In the last couple of days, as our forces move further and further through the northern Gaza Strip, and the evidence is shown, we understand where they were detained and held in hospital basements, tied up. We now know that Noah Marciano from my city of Modi'in, we now know that she was killed. The circumstances are still unknown, or at least not made public. But that day, Black Sabbath, has changed Israel, and I think it's changed the Jewish world for generations. And by the end of the 7th of October, Israel found ourselves in a state of war. Not on a military operation as we have seen in the past, and we are always very, very careful never to use that word war, because war comes with a particular set of consequences, economically, socially, legally, but our country was at war. We started with the air attacks on Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. And as some of you may be familiar, when you engage in the kind of warfare that our army is engaging in now, it is unlike anything that we normally see in war. It's not like Russia and Ukraine, where you've got army facing army. This is asymmetrical warfare. This is warfare fought house to house, building to building, in the tunnels, above ground and underground, with an army of terrorists that is as insidious and heinous as they come, who booby trap and who cynically use their civilian population as human shields. And you've heard a lot about that in the media, the use of human shields, and a lot of concerns about the humanitarian impact, the impact on civilians, and whether or not Israel is prosecuting this war with respect and with abidance of the international laws of armed conflict. So I want to touch on that because every country is within their sovereign right to defend their citizens. It's our legal right. It's our moral imperative for our army to defend our citizens. I don't think any country, Australia, America, England, whoever, would allow for a massacre of their civilians to take place without responding as Israel is responding. The laws of armed conflict, and unfortunately, along with being a journalist, I've had to become a legal expert as well over the last couple of weeks. The laws of armed conflict are very, very specific. Under the laws of armed conflict, Israel has a right to defend herself. Israel, when you use civilian infrastructure like hospitals, ambulances, schools, mosques, where we have found Hamas to have set up tunnels, rocket launchers, weapons caches, you change the protected status of those areas into legal military targets. Now, Hamas knows that, and they make sure that they use their civilians as shields. They make sure that they use their hospitals, their mosques, their schools, people's personal homes as shields for against the attacks. And you don't have to believe me or the IDF. You can even believe Hamas in their own words. They've been very, very, very open about saying, hey, we've built tunnels. They're for our protection. We go in there. We want to avoid the aerial bombardments. But our civilians, not our problem of the United Nations. So here we sit with a situation where Israel, more than any other army in the world, is warning civilians, creating humanitarian corridors at great risk to our soldiers because our soldiers are being fired on by Hamas while they ensure the safety of Palestinian civilians, dropping leaflets, phoning people, texting people, please get to safety. Now, I know that for many of you, you are seeing the images coming out of Gaza and you are horrified and you are traumatized and you are angry, and you should be. We are angry too. We are angry that Hamas has forced a war on the citizens of Israel and the citizens of Gaza. I don't think any of us want to see a Palestinian child suffer. We don't want that. I think you have to have no soul if you're okay with that. But this is the enemy that Israel is fighting. And I know it's getting difficult for you out there in the diaspora when you hear these loud calls for ceasefires and the attacks on your community like you had on Friday night in Caulfield. But please know that I'm watching very, very carefully what is happening in communities around the world. I sit on a group with advocacy experts, and we are monitoring very, very, very closely what is happening and how to respond. But it's important that people understand why Israel is fighting this war so hard, why there will be no ceasefire, and why our war is just. In the last couple of days, the IDF have shown the world how hospitals, where the most vulnerable, where babies, where the sick are helped and take shelter, how they are being exploited. We saw the footage from outside Al-Quds hospital as Hamas terrorists fired RPGs on our troops and ran in and out the hospital. Why did they run in and out the hospital? To get their weapons, to take shelter, because they know that the moral Israeli army is not going to attack a hospital. We saw Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, probably our most famous face of this war right now, take us into Rantisi Children's Hospital underground to show us the weapons caches that have been stored there. to show us where they believe that some of our hostages may have been held. Most likely a woman, because there was an item of women's clothing. Curtains on the wall. Behind those curtains, a blank wall, in order to force them to record videos. Some of those videos have been made public, and I definitely won't be sharing them because I will not participate in a Hamas psychological warfare operation against our people. We saw what is believed to be one of the motorcycles used to go into our peaceful, verdant, beautiful kibbutzim along that border and murder our citizens, kidnap them and bring them into the Gaza Strip. And we saw a schedule on the wall. Which Hamas terrorist is responsible for looking after those hostages? And last night, Jonathan Conricus, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, took us into Shifa Hospital. This is the main hospital. This is where we're hearing a lot from the United Nations and the World Health Organization. He took us in there and he showed us in the MRI room what has been stashed behind the MRI machine, the weapons, the hand grenades, the kind of equipment that Hamas terrorists are not just using to attack our men and women fighting in the Gaza Strip, but used on that October day. I keep saying September because we can only compare it to September the 11th, that they used on that October day to come into our peaceful communities and create absolute terror. And how has the world been responding? We have had phenomenal response from our allies, the United States, the United Kingdom defeating a vote in Parliament last night to call for a ceasefire, some horrific scenes outside Parliament with anti-Israel protesters. A huge thank you to Joe Biden, who has not only sent massive aircraft carriers with a lot of military equipment, but said last night, he said, this war will end when Hamas can no longer kill innocent Israelis. The Australian government, and I know we have some debates around Penny Wong, or Penny Wrong, as I like to call her, because she's misjudged this. Prime Minister Trudeau, who I know has just been spoken to by Benny Gantz, who reminded him exactly, why we are fighting this war. The incredible solidarity that has been shown to us by foreign leaders, many foreign ministers who are in and out of this country all the time. I can't even keep up. Your previous Prime Minister, ScoMo, Scott Morrison, coming to visit us. And this is the situation that we found ourselves in. As Jewish communities around the world, we found ourselves under siege. It is my belief that this war has given a green light to every Jew hater to come out. But they've done us a favor. They've really done us a favor. They've made themselves very easy for us to identify. And for those of us who have been shouting for years, that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, you can see it now as plain as day. From the calls of from the river to the sea, for us to be eliminated, to calls for a ceasefire, which means that Israel must lay down their arms while Hamas rearms and reattacks. And if you don't believe us, believe Hamas, again, in their own words, saying, we will commit more 7th of Octobers. We will do it again and again and again and again until you are defeated. One thing I have to say, and I know because I always get this question whenever I speak to crowds, I always get the inevitable, why is Israel's public relations so bad? I don't think we can say that anymore. The IDF has been phenomenal in updating us every single day, all day. As a journalist, I sit here, I get my updates all the time, which I share with you, and I get millions of them. We're here, we're there. Here are the pictures. Here is the video evidence. They're taking the foreign press into Shifa Hospital. CNN's been in, Fox News has been in, other foreign media have been into Shifa Hospital to see what we have discovered. Our diplomats around the world, we've opened up the horrific body cam footage for all the foreign media, for parliamentarians, for people to see. This is not something that we as Israelis want, to have to parade our dead in order for the world to see. But unfortunately, we're dealing with a horrific trend of massacre denial. I know some of you might be saying, but why don't they believe us? And I'm going to quote President Herzog. President Herzog said, there are some whose hatred is buried so deep that they could watch Hamas broadcast live all day on Telegram with glee, with joy, what they were doing to us, and still not believe it. I've even seen today, Sky News, a few people saying that evidence that we saw in Shifa Hospital, but was it real? I don't know what else we need to do. Do we need to throw you down a tunnel for you to believe us? But I tell you what does give me hope. I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen Jewish people so united around the world. We learned on that horrible day, it's not about a mechitza, if you're right or if you left, if you're secular, if you're religious. We learned on that day that they're coming for us all. But our response, as much as we are grieving, as much as we are devastated, and as much as we are scared, our response has been phenomenal. We have said to the world, we are no longer going to apologize for our right to exist. We are going to fight you back in every way we can, whether it be our army, whether it be in the media, whether it be waving that flag, whether it be putting the pressure on our governments to release our hostages, or just lighting our Shabbat candles, or wearing our Magen Davids with pride. We are Jewish, we are united, we might be a lot smaller than you, but we are proud, and this time we fight back. And this is where I want to ask you all to help us as WIZO. Anita spoke about the powers of soft diplomacy, and nobody does soft diplomacy like a WIZO woman. In our 103 years of history, we have been on that front line, whether it was our women before the state was even born, holding beautiful soirees to distract the British occupiers here at the time, so our men could ship in and out weapons to defend the country, or whether it's at the United Nations, our wonderful Evelyn Summers on the front line saying, let my people go. And by the way, that Secretary General is a Nazi. Or whether it has been throughout our history, manning soup kitchens in the Warsaw Ghetto, or fighting fascism in South America, or fighting apartheid in South Africa. Wherever there has been a WIZO woman, we have been on the front lines using our powers of soft diplomacy, and I'm asking you now. I'm asking you, as Anita so passionately said, put the pressure on your governments, on everyone you can, to demand the immediate release of our hostages. We have sent letters to the Red Cross, to all the United Nations bodies, demanding that they release our hostages. I see from our ambassador that deals with the United Nations a very harsh meeting with UNICEF saying, you have not acknowledged, not once, that we have over 30 children being held captive in Gaza. Not once have you acknowledged the atrocities committed against our people? Whether it's us now, and I know Diklas has sent it out through the marketing channels, I've sent it out on my WhatsApp groups, which is why I really ask you to use the material that I send you, the campaign against UN women. The 25th of November is the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Join that campaign. Not Me Too unless you're a Jew. Our women count. Our sisters were brutally raped. Our children were brutally raped to the point where their pelvises were shattered and their legs could not be closed for burial. As harsh as that is to hear, it's the reality that we faced. And we demand an answer from the United Nations. Presidents and chairpeople of WIZO, you're going to receive throughout the course of the day a letter that I've drafted to the International Alliance of Women, which is comprised of various organizations that also have power in places like the United Nations, demanding that they acknowledge the atrocities of the 7th of October, demanding that they call for the release of the hostages, demanding that they acknowledge the gender-based violence and rape perpetrated against our women and children, demanding they condemn the use of civilians as human shields, because it seems to be incumbent on us to speak against the use of human shields as well. And this is why, as our army go out there on the battlefield to fight, our WIZO army goes out there as well. And yes, nobody looks better, nobody's dressed better than a WIZO army, but we are powerful, and I ask you all, please, to use that power of persuasion, of soft diplomacy, to help fight this battle. Our beautiful women, our beautiful young girls and our children are not here anymore to speak for themselves. They're not here anymore to speak for themselves. We have to speak for them. And before I take your questions, I'm going to echo what Anita said. Yachad nenatzeach. Together we will win. Am Yisrael Chai. We have outlived the others, and we will outlive this one.
Oh, Rolene, Am Israel Chai. I have a lot of questions here for you. So, wow, I will start. I have Sylvia asking, Rolene, I know you do not have a crystal ball, but in your opinion, do you think that Iran will itself enter the war?
I think that's a very good question. Look, they have said, the Iranian leaders said to Hamas last night, we are not coming to fight this war on your behalf. They say that they weren't told about this war. Do we trust Iran? We most certainly don't. You know, we've learned, unfortunately, throughout our history that when somebody tells you they're coming to kill you, to believe them. And we unfortunately saw the evidence of that on the 7th of October. And I think that having some serious hardware from the United States and the United Kingdom stationed off our shores has said a lot. And we've also seen interesting maneuvers from the Arab world. The Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen have fired on Eilat, and Saudi Arabia are shooting down a lot of those missiles. And Jordan, no matter what saber rattling you hear from the foreign minister, they've asked for their air defense systems to be bolstered around the region by the Americans. So the region's on alert. We know who we're dealing with. And while we might not see IRGC in Gaza, we know exactly who we're dealing with. And as our army have said, we're watching the entire region. Wherever you attack us, we will respond. And they have Iran firmly on the radar, should Iran do something.
Thank you. Another question was, how do you respond to people who are pro-free Palestine?
I think we're all pro-free Palestine. We all want to see the people of Palestine or Gaza living free, but we say free them from Hamas, because as long as you have a Hamas in power, there's no freedom for anybody. You know, we've made it clear we don't want to occupy the Gaza Strip. Do we want to have a hand in security? Of course we do. How that will look, we don't know. But yeah, we do want I think we all want a free Palestine, where Palestinians live in peace, away from a terror organization that holds them and us as perpetual hostages to terror.
Thank you. Another question. How effective do you believe our posting on social media are? Do you think we are preaching to the converted, as we don't know if some of our contact may have unfriended us due to the bag of information we may post and they don't want to know?
Well, I think keep posting. First of all, you have to speak to the converted. You have to keep the converted, especially as we see images coming in from Gaza that are upsetting, and we have to keep reinforcing why we are just. There are some people that we have to just take into account this is too much for them, and they don't want to be involved either way, and that's fine. There are those you're never going to convince. You're never going to convince them. There's no point in getting in the mud with the pig. You both get dirty and the pig enjoys it. I've befriended people. I've had friends of 20 years. If you can't be bothered to ask us how we're doing, it's not taking a side. I don't want you around. Yalla, bye-bye. Bringing the people that care about us here in Israel. So I think keep posting. Keep putting it out there, because you never know who you are reaching. You never know who you are reaching. And this is a time where we have to be a voice for our country, for each other, and most importantly, for the men, women, and children who were brutally murdered and are being held in captivity in Gaza. We are their voices. We have to bear witness for them. We have to keep speaking for them, because they cannot speak for themselves anymore.
Beautiful. I have another one, Rolene from Anonymous. I feel so silent to say anything or show my pride in Israel due to the hostility in Melbourne. Do you have any advice? As a person who circulated in the greater community, it seems to be a woke cause.
I understand how you're feeling. I understand how you're feeling. You know, it's easy for us here in Israel, you know, we're sitting in Israel to say, go out there and be proud. And I think if you're scared to wear your Magen David because you think that some lunatic hater is going to attack you, I understand that. But there's other ways to show your solidarity. You can support WIZO. You can bake chalot. You can light your candles. You can do something that's meaningful for you, that makes you feel safe, and it makes you feel that you are contributing. You know, not everybody is a mashigana like me that, you know, no brain, no pain goes out there. But I think you've got to find the things that are comfortable for you to do. And hopefully, as time goes on, and I'll tell you a little secret, I'll tell you what I'm noticing. Most people are getting sick and tired of what they're seeing at these marches. I don't know why, maybe because I like to punish myself. I like to read the comments on articles and on YouTube clips. And I'll tell you a little secret. People are sick and tired of the hate speech, of the violence, of the lack of respect for anyone, for the defacing of war memorials, and for the general behavior that they are seeing. You know, I was watching outside the UK Parliament last night, and I was reading people's comments, and I actually thought to myself, carry on behaving like that, because all you are doing is you are annoying people, and I'm seeing more and more now. I see what Israel's dealing with. So carry on behaving like a Michiganer. You're only working in our favor. But I hear what you're saying.
Rolene, I have to agree with you, and this is the feeling here as well in Melbourne. And yes, I think they had enough from the pro-Palestinians doing it all. So,
Yeah.
Rolene, yeah, and it's fully the feeling. And we had here a poll that's showing that the average Australian supporting Israel by miles. So they really had enough. So it's a good uplifting. And I have to tell you that thank you for your informative and uplifting talk, Rolene. We all enjoy listening to you and enjoying reading your daily update. Rolene, always, you're strengthening us and you're strengthening the Jewish people. So with this note, I would like to thank everybody for attending. Make sure you're keeping up to date with WIZO and all that we are doing. Thank you to Anita, Friedman, Rolene, Mark. I would love to say together, עם ישראל חי. ביחד ננצח. תודה רבה. תודה.
So that, guys.